Supercharge community, how's it going? Here, Amenta here. We're back with season 2, episode 1 for Super Hour podcast. I'm joined by my good friend and my co-host Hoarder Gamer. Today, we have the Punisher, Bill Millsap. I'm just going to call you that from now on because I think you've earned that as a title because your performance is incredible. But Bill, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. Thank you guys
Fantastic.
so much for having me. I appreciate you guys having me
Of
on.
course, not a problem. You have a pretty good lineage on IMDb, some of which I surprised you with in a private message. We can definitely discuss that.
Sometimes as a game performer, you end up getting these jobs and they're all done under code names. And so while you know that you've been working on something, sometimes they sneak up on you and go, by the way, you're in this game. And you don't realize it until you check your IMDb and you're like, I didn't know I was in that game.
That's
But now I
exactly
know.
what happened. Is I shared Transformers on the first ad I created, and Bill's like, just so you know, I wasn't in that. I'm like, well,
Yeah, I was
actually,
like, I think I couldn't remember if I auditioned for that or if they just hired me for that, and I guess they just hired me off of my audition. I think maybe I can't remember. It's just there's some of them bleed together, and so
of
that's on
course,
me.
it was
That's
just.
that's 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 my goldfish brain deciding not to remember. And but I was like, oh, I'm in a Transformers game as a narrator. That's
Yep.
awesome.
It was just it
So I
was
squeed a little bit.
it was
I literally was like, I'm not in that.
yeah, it was hilarious. I felt like, did I read something wrong? So I went back and I was like, no, he's credited as the narrator. And Bill's like,
Yeah.
oh, sick. I'm like,
Yeah.
there you go. Happy New Year.
Amazing.
Yeah, you're part of a
I'll
Transformers
try
fan.
not to have. By the way, I pepper my speech with curse words. I will try my best not to.
Oh, that's fine. We're
I'll
all
try to
adults
be a
here.
good boy. But yeah, I spend a lot of time directing, and sometimes I f bomb in the middle of my directing just to get ferocity from other actors. I'm like, just
The
and then
Punisher
they
comes
they
out.
do it, and I get great performances. But it's like it's very different than a long, long time ago. I actually worked as a camp counselor, and you couldn't say any curse words at all, and so you would get out into like your normal everyday life, and you'd be like, frick, and people are like, what are you talking about, man? And now I just f bomb everywhere. So I'm just kids beware. That's all I'm saying.
100%. I understand that.
Children, children, just put in the noise canceling earphones or something.
So look.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Harder. I'll be Canadian here. I apologize.
For about 2 years, I used to stream Skylander games and like Disney Infinity. So yes, I know the whole thing about not
Hmm.
swearing. It's a
Yeah.
challenge at times.
Yes.
Especially when it's a passionate moment. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to
You
let
do
this
not
out.
want to. Yeah, you do not want to let loose a torrent of sailor speak when you're doing Kingdom Hearts. It's just not. You know, that's not the best
Yes.
image.
Definitely a styles clash. So going through your IMDb, there were some surprises apparently. However, we can see what you've done or what you're working on. I would really like to just dive into how this started for you, like how you got into acting, voice acting, directing. Like, what was the beginning of
Oh,
that?
okay. The beginning of that is literally just watching cartoons as a kid
Hmm.
and mimicking the things that I'm hearing. And my parents, I would drive them nuts. I would literally drive them nuts because I was a big Warner Brothers kid. I was a big Mel Blanc kid. And so I would be, going around making impressions of Mel Blanc characters and or specifically the one that I could lock into quickly was when Howie Mandel made his first Bobby reference with
Hmm.
the bubble voice of "Oh my God," and I would do that, and they'd be like, "Stop that baby talk!" And now as an adult, they're like, "Make more money," you know. So so follow your passions, kids. Sometimes doing the crazy stuff when you're a kid. I remember that I would get comic books and they would have these crazy out of context. You're reading this, you know, uh, uh, really intense storyline from X-Men that has, marriage and death and all this other stuff, and then you get this one-page layout for Hostess Twinkies that are the same characters that are
Yes.
completely different. And so my friends and I would actually turn on an old tape recorder and we would create character voices for these things and mock them mercilessly. And then we would play them back and just cry laughing. And so that's how I got started. But my first intention when I came into this industry was actually to be in live action film. And I did a lot of visual effects. I worked on a bunch of big, motion pictures and acted in some miniseries and, those types of things. And then when I was working on, of all things, maybe you guys have seen this volcano movie, Dante's Peak.
Great
I
movie.
was I helped work on about 50% of the miniature work on all of that film. And while I was on that, I was like, I want to get into voiceover more. I had done radio in college, where I did 4 years of doing midnight until 7 in the morning every Friday for it took away a lot of social life in college because when your Friday nights are usurped with you just speaking into a microphone for 7 hours, it just happens to be that. And I would do these big radio programs, not spoken word radio programs, but like, DJ work. And from there, coming out, I was like, I got to get to know this better. And I found a woman by the name of Dolores Deal. And unfortunately, she's left us now. But she was one of the old Hanna-Barbera people. And she was a teacher, and she had all of these courses to do. And so I would work 12 hours on Dante's Peak, and smelling of sawdust and glue and all these things, I would go and I would do classes to learn mic technique from her. I was learning commercials and video games and animation and all of these things. And I worked really hard at that for a number of years. And then life gets in the way and you take a break. And then I had, as we do, sometimes we have bad breakups. And after the bad breakup, I was like, I got to get back into something I love. Oh, remember the voiceover stuff? So I went and a friend of mine said, hey, you look like you need to get out of your own way. I heard that there's a lecture by this guy named Bob Bergen. Maybe you might want to
Yep.
come and listen to it. And so I showed up to the lecture, and he was asking questions of the audience, if there were any questions. And I started asking questions, and he was like, he's asking the right questions. And he pulled me aside at the ending of it. And he said, look, I've got a 2-year waiting list for my animation class, but somebody backed out last minute. It's this Tuesday. Do you want it? And I said, yes. And from that point on, Bob Bergen basically sort of became a mentor to me. He and I stay in contact now. Having lunch, dinner, we try and hang out, and I've learned so much from him. And from that, it just propelled me forward. I got my first commercial demo done through 2 friends of mine, Jessica G. George and Grant George, and commercial work, and left my money job and did these different workshops. And some of the workshops you can get in front of professionals, and I got in front of an agent, and that agent said, yes, we'll take you, especially after I left my job, just to let them know I was doing it full time. They were like, oh, yeah, we'll take you because you're serious about it. And so I have been with that same agency, Vox, now for 11 years.
Nice.
So, yeah, and it's not all been wine and roses. First job I auditioned for Vox, I booked. Then I booked the next year enough to make a small living off of it. And then I didn't book anything for 2 years.
Oof.
Oh,
And like most of us creatives, sometimes you got to take the money jobs to get where you're going. So I have all my hearts open to all the people who are waiters and waitresses and rideshare drivers and assistants and anything that you need to bag, grocery baggers, all those people. I have been you, I see you, I am you. And it's only been in the last 3 years that I'm making a solid living at it and making more at it than I ever have in my life. So tenacity. It's taken 10 years. It took 7 years after leaving a big money job. I worked for an entertainment law firm for about 13 years. And I left that job to do this full time. And it took 7 years to get myself established. But now I'm literally sort of like what I refer to as the Holy Grail, which is I am a working creative. I may not be making like millions of dollars yet, but I'm making a living at it, and it is a glorious feeling to be making a living doing what you love. So tenacity, never losing your eyes on the prize, realizing that despair is a part of it, surrounding yourself with all the people that you take classes with, because this is very isolating. I'm in a 5 foot by 5 foot booth for 8 to 10 hours a day. And you're just you and a microphone. So it's surrounding yourself with good people, being supported by good people, and getting, as Bob has told me, you get high at the mic. It's the process that makes you happy. It's not, hey, I'm aiming to book that. It's, ooh, look at this piece of copy that has come in front of me. I get to act this right now and send it out into the world. Now, whether it comes back to you or not, awesome, but you're acting, you're doing it, you're getting a chance to dig into it. Is it a slog sometimes? Yes. I've had as many as 43 auditions in one day, and you're just like, oh my God, I gotta do all of them. I gotta make them unique. And that internal, talk inside your head just spins out of control. But then you just calm and you pick what you feel you are best at and you focus on it and you have a blast at it and you go out and then you live your life.
Hmm. I'm glad you said all that because we're dealing with the situation of everyone wants the Netflix success where everything's instant, where it's you hit play, you get what you want. And it's like there's so much psychological research about how, it takes 10,000 hours minimum to become an expert in your field. The get rich quick is about 10 years minimum. And people are like, oh my goodness. So when you make that decision, like, I'm a creative as well as hoarder. So we understand the mindset of, we use our creative ability as a way to live our life. And it's scary. It is very scary
It's
because
very
you're
scary.
raised
Okay,
to go to
so
school.
my first, so I started, I'm a lot older than I look. I'm 52. So I started doing radio from 90 until 94, and my first voiceover class was in 1996. It is now 2024, about to be 2025. And only in the last 3 years have I been able to make a solid, consistent, I don't have to worry about things living at it. Have I had a couple of really good years where I've been, yeah, that was my main income. I was an actor for that year. Yes, I have. Is this meant to discourage anybody? No. No, 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 no. The reason we do this is because we're passionate about it, and the idea of not doing it is more painful than doing it.
Hmm.
We do this because it feeds our soul. Um, we do this because it just, if I was to step away from this, I don't think I would know what to do with my life. I would sit there and go, shouldn't I be acting right now? Shouldn't I be directing or writing something right now? The idea of living a life where I'm not doing something creative, being a storyteller in some way, shape, or form, doesn't make sense to me. And because of that, that's the reason why we persist. Um, the entertainment law job, I took it because it was at the time they were looking for a night assistant. When you're dealing in entertainment law and contractual law, dealing with all of these big clients, you have clients that are overseas or in completely different time zones. And so you would have the 9 to 5ers, and then I would come in at 3:30 and do 3:30 to 10. I was doing 6.5 hours a day. I got a chance to do all of my mornings to do my auditions and do all those things or do my writing or whatever I needed to do. And I didn't have to have a lunch break in the middle of it. And I got to avoid traffic because I was just going in and doing that. And I did that portion for 4 years. And then I got sucked into the money, shift to a day shift. And I did that for another 9 years. And then finally I was like, okay, I have a small nest egg. And if I'm going to do this, I have to do this. And because of reaching a place at where I was working where I felt like I wasn't going to advance anymore, it also propelled me to go, well, I can live like this or I can take the chance. And the idea of living like this was not enticing enough for me not to go, you know what? Here's my 30-day notice. I love you guys. You guys are amazing. You guys have held me for 13 years. I appreciate you guys so much. I'm going to go and I'm going to pursue this. And so I did. And people were like, wow. So here you are at literally, 40, switching careers. 40. Okay. And now here I am. And I'm making more money now than I ever did back when I was working in entertainment law. So sometimes these things work out, sometimes. And when it slid into place, when I started directing, and I've always wanted to be a director. A lot of people have said, you're more of a behind the camera kind of guy. And once I slipped into directing and realized that all of these things that I'd been learning throughout my life between playing music and writing and acting in front of a microphone and acting on stage and having it all come together in the way I direct for voiceover, for video games, and for anime. I'm also an anime English dub director. Those things all came together, and it was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is good. This feels like home. And that, to me, was such a profound feeling. It was such a profound experience to actually settle in and just go, You didn't have to feel like, oh, I have to prove myself to other people to make sure that they understand how creative I am or anything. There's that anxiety to show. I need to show people. I need to show people. I need to show people because that way they'll pull me on and bring me into other things. Settling in and going, this is where I'm supposed to be. And this is comfortable. And I know I can do this, and people are recognizing things without me having to push. That settling was such a profound relief and a profound experience to me. And sometimes I still go, oh my God, that's still happening. I still feel that. I'm still like, shouldn't I be anxious? And oh, maybe I don't have to be. Maybe I can feel secure for once in entertainment. Oh my God.
No, it all makes sense because Dr. Joe Dispenza shared in his book that we spend 70% of our life in fight or flight mode, just constantly stressed, constantly anxious. And I'm 39 years old next month, and I've jumped around career. You know, I started off with football, then pro wrestling, and then security and bodyguard work, and then all my concussions. And I was like,
all these things
you,
were interesting to
it
you.
was,
And
it
you
was,
wanted
yeah.
to see what it was going to feel like. You wanted to see if it was going to be tangible. It didn't matter if it was going to be long term. I mean, pro wrestling, how long can you do that? Pro football, how long can you do that? You know, I mean, you just went, I like that. I want to do it. And so you do. And you look back on that time and you go, well, I got a chance to do it. It's not that I failed at it. No, fuck that.
Hmm.
Fuck failure. Fuck all those things. It's falling upward. It's falling upward. And so you got a chance to do those things. And now you look back and go, yeah, remember that hit that took out my left tooth and gave me a concussion? Remember that was good times, man.
Lots of fun stories, but like you said, eventually it's all about self-awareness, right? Just being true to yourself and being like, just trying to ignore that pressure of what's the external voice is going to tell me. Like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's like, okay, but that's when you're following like a general blueprint of society. But when you are a creative force and you're trying to find your own creative environment, it's you have to take that risk. Like, there's no other option. But okay,
True.
I gotta go against the common speech here, and it makes people uncomfortable. Like, when people found out that I was doing full-time podcasting, full-time gaming, they're like, what? I'm like, it's the only place I feel happy. It's the only place that brings me joy. It allows harder contest to this. I'm a very creative driven person. If I am
Yes.
creating something, I'm home, like creating a logo, creating a podcast
And you get
guest.
that laser focus, and
Oh,
it's like
hyper focus
it's
is
almost like
crazy.
your sense of self almost disappears because you are so immersed in what you're doing. Now, to what you said, the need quotient. Yes, I need to do this. I need to do this. There is a balance. Yes, you need to make sure
Hmm.
that you have enough money to make sure that you have the lights on and the food inside the fridge. But there's the opposite side of need of your internal needs versus the external needs. External needs is be responsible. Always be responsible. But following that internal desire, that internal pull, which can be defined as need because you yourself need to feed the soul, you need to honor that too. Because if you ignore it, then you are not going to be happy within yourself. You're going to go, I let that go. And maybe 10 years from now, I go, why did I let that go? There's still times that I go, I took that time away from when I was learning in the very beginning until I came back with Bob. I look back and go, why did I step away? You know, now it
Exactly.
doesn't matter because I'm where I'm at, but where would I have been if I had? Blah, 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 blah. That still happens. We are programmed to constantly challenge ourselves about whether or not we're doing our best, whether or not we're maximizing our time, whether or not we're succeeding to a stature that other people will look at externally and go, we acknowledge you and accept you. But the most important part is, are you fed? Are you clothed? Are you covered? And are you sustained from the inside? You don't have to make a lot of money here, guys. This is not a freaking race where if we don't make 6 to 8 figures, we're going to survive this life with accolades and explosions and fireworks and all this other stuff. It's a matter of day to day. I can now, my biggest purchase, I bought myself a super automatic espresso machine. I bought it refurbished.
Nice.
But now I get to make good coffee at home. You know what? This is one of my treats.
That's a win.
This is important to me. This is I get to look forward to it. The previous night I get to go, oh, that coffee tomorrow. And it's that. It's living in that moment, coming into this booth with my coffee and going, I get to play with actors today. Day to day. My life moved so fast. 13 years went by in a blink. And I almost feel like I'm not 52. I feel like those 13 years, I didn't feel like I grew. So I still feel like I'm in my 40s because all I did was drive, help with somebody else's stuff, drive home. Drive, help with somebody else, drive home. Now my day is filled with, what am I going to do today? How am I going to nurture that person's performance? How am I going to do this? And I get to enjoy moment by moment each day. And my life has slowed down. And it's so much more savory and beautiful and wonderful. It's not to say that, having money isn't a wonderful thing where you can go on vacations and everything else. But money is for experiences. And if you can afford the experiences that you want, like good coffee, then you're doing it. You're doing it. You're doing it.
Beautiful.
So, Hoarder, you're not saying enough.
I'm about to. So I started with retail, and then basically I became disabled. And then after that, I studied voiceover for a bit. And then basically I've always had the need to kind of like perform for people. I put out my first album because I've always loved music at the age of 44. So I'm actually 48 right now. So
beautiful, and I'm sure you're still playing music. Good.
Yes, yeah, I'm actually working on my second album right now.
You can't put it down, man. Yeah.
Yes. And goth industrial, so it's something that's not everyone loves.
That's my background, man.
Oh, awesome, very cool.
My radio show started out because it was the '90s in metal, and right as I was getting into college radio, I did, the first 6 months was still metal, but metal was dying because grunge came around right there at the 90s. That's when metal sort of was really just taking a big step back. Hair bands, all that other stuff. And my metal was like Megadeth and Testament and Pantera and those types of things. And then I discovered 2 albums that drew me into gothic and industrial. The first one was 9 Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine.
Incredible.
And the
record.
second one was Ministry's The Mind is a Terrible Thing to
Ministry
Taste.
is one of my favorite bands.
And those 2 things were the bridge between electric and metal that went, oh, I can go down this rabbit hole. And from there, it became 88.3 KUCR's Crush Radio, the leading edge of metal industrial and the underground adrenaline hype. So I ended up getting into all of this techno. I found Moby's really early like mixes of really harsh techno stuff.
Yeah.
I was finding that stuff. So you're in my wheelhouse, man. I got to hear your music.
Awesome. Yeah, I go under the name My Iron Spine, which is actually technically related to my disability.
I freaking love it.
Because it was a scoliosis surgery I had when I was in high school, and when it healed and everything 20 years later, it very much limited. It's like extreme arthritis to the lower back.
Oh yeah. No, I can understand that.
But 9 Inch Nails Ministry. I actually had Martin Atkins. He did drums on my first album. He did one of the tracks, which was an awesome thing. And full story, real quick. He had this cool thing where he was like, "Hey, I'm kind of auctioning off this thing where if you spend this amount of money, then I'll do drums on your track." And it was a very reasonable amount of money. I was like, "Yeah, that sounds amazing." He was totally awesome, and I have a whole mess of things going on with anxiety and stuff. So it was like honestly 8 or 9 years later that I used those drums, but I contacted him, let him know, and he was really cool about it. I said, "Yeah, I was in my head. I left music for a while." Super great guy. Super great.
No. That's and that's an important thing to bring to the forefront here in this conversation is that imposter syndrome. It never leaves you. Your internal voice that wonders if you're good enough never leaves you. I am working on a personal project right now. One of the things that I've done is that I've realized that, yes, I'm a director, I'm an actor, but more importantly, I'm a storyteller. I have been writing since I was in middle school. I have a couple of screenplays that have won film festivals for being unproduced screenplays. And right now, I am in the midst of starting to do the development of making one of my screenplays into an adult animated feature film. It's time for us to take the adult animation that everybody's thriving on, because let's look at the industry, guys. Let's look at Arcane and Blue-Eyed Samurai and Secret Level and Love, Death, and Robots and all of these things that everybody's going, ooh, please give us more of that. And then look at anime performing in the theaters where Jujutsu Kaisen film knocks Fast and Furious out of the top #1 spot. It's opening weekend. These things, I'm like, okay, it's time for me to really dive in. Now, I have talked about getting into it and starting the development process, and this is me holding me accountable for a year now. And the thing that's holding me back is I used to draw when I was a kid, but I'm like, I have to draw all my storyboards, and I'm scared to start because am I good enough to have this image that's in here that I can see so clearly come out of my hand and onto a page? And that stops us. That stops us. And sometimes you just have to do it scared. You just have to do it scared. You just have to go, no, I'm going to do it. And that's what I'm doing. Like, my industry kind of shuts down right now. And it will be closed between now until like the 7th of January. So that gives me some time to go, all right, draw. Do it.
Awesome.
Sit down, storyboard, do it. Get it done. Because you're always going to regret it if you don't.
And I love how you mentioned imposter syndrome, because Yuri Lowenthal, Spider-Man himself, was on Super Hour podcast a year ago, and he spoke clearly about how he still struggles with it. Like, a superhero like Spider-Man still has imposter syndrome. Like, it's something that we all deal with because it's an internal thing. It doesn't matter how much money is in your bank account. That doesn't change your internal thoughts. Like, you still can have, depression and anxiety and mental health struggles, regardless of how your bank account is full. Like, and that's why I tell people all the time. Like, I did another thing I did was I mentored a youth for 9 years, hence the name Hero Mentor. So I did that for 9 years, and I realized like the most important thing I focused on with those kids was fulfillment. Like, there's success and then there's fulfillment. Like, yeah, you know what? You can look at your bank account and be like, I made $185,000 last year, but are you fulfilled? Like, are you happy? And it's like,
yeah, is that number that stares back at you from the screen as important as the feeling you get when you're doing something?
And once you ask that question, that's when you can see them start to feel uncomfortable because they're thinking differently. But it's a good discomfort because they're like, yeah, I'm actually not. Like, I know people who make 6 figures a year who are miserable, but then I know people who make 20 to 30 to 40,000 a year, but they're loving what they do. And it's like, that's what you look for is yeah.
And the struggle is there, and the struggle is part of it. The struggle, I know it sounds shitty to say builds character, but the truth is it doesn't build character. It builds resilience. It builds a thicker skin so that you're not so hurt when things don't go correctly. It just gives you a little bit more pep behind you to go, okay, the next one. Okay. And in terms of imposter syndrome, A-list actors still have it. I was watching a round table with a bunch of main actors, and you'll probably find this online somewhere. And Daniel Craig was one of them. And one of the younger actors was literally said imposter syndrome. And while the kid was talking, you can hear him in the background. He goes, it never goes away. It never goes away. That's James Bond,
right?
Guys. Okay? If you can't get bigger than a man who's had a series of 5 major billion-dollar franchise stuff saying, yeah, it never goes away, understand that it's okay to feel it. But it's how you deal with it that will fulfill you even further.
100%. 100%, because it's a good conversation to have because our society is so driven by the financial worth and the financial intelligence. And it's like one of my favorite topics to discuss is emotional intelligence, where it's like we don't have enough focus on that, like the empathy, the
Oh
social
yeah.
skills, the self awareness, the motivation. Everyone is just, it's getting to the point that we're living a very robotic lifestyle where it's the same
Well,
thing.
it yeah, I mean, we can get into a real big psychological discussion
We
about it.
could.
But to lay it down simply is this. Who are you when you set down your phone? Nobody else is watching. You're in your house. You're not working. You're not doing your job. Who are you? Not who are you going to be when you post whatever photo or post this or try to promote this or you're going to the job to make this money. Who are you? What do you do? What do you find fulfilling? Because those moments are the moments where you're not being seen, where you're not trying to perform for other people, where you're not trying to live up to a standard that other people are looking at. Those are the moments that define who you are. There's two things that I want to bring up. One was I started traveling when I was younger. And I realized, and this was back before we had phones and could do a lot of this stuff. Here I am, I think it's 98 to, yeah, I did a lot of traveling between 98 and 2000. And I learned more about who I was based on the fact that I was meeting new people, and who I was not based on, oh, these people know me as a certain way. I have to present myself, who I am, naturally in these moments. And I discovered so much about myself based on how I dealt with new people. Constantly. New people, new people, new people, new people. And it showed me who I was. And that, to me, was important because I think once you strip away your career, and once you strip away what you want people to know about you socially by taking the phone and setting it down, what do? What fulfills you? I mentioned that I built miniatures, okay, a long time ago, right? I miss it. So what did I do? I bought one of those book nooks that you can frickin' build that's like basically an adult Lego box, and it becomes like a triptych that looks like it came out of a Miyazaki picture, but it's really intricate, and it has lighting, and it has cats, and it has like lanterns and stuff like that, and it's going to take me 6 to 8 hours to build this thing. But I'm going to enjoy every moment of it. I'm going to put on a Miyazaki soundtrack and sit there with my glue and my tweezers and my everything else, and I'm going to spend time doing it. Why? Because I miss it, because I love it, because I do it, because it fulfills that creative part of me that doesn't need to be witnessed by other people. So find those things that sustain you when other people are not looking. Find those things that make you happy, because if you don't, and you're constantly pushing out, see me, do me, validate me, all those types of things, that's where the depression comes in hard.
100%.
Anxiety too. It's really heavy. So be good to your souls. Be good to your souls, people.
And I love how
The Punisher says be good to your freaking soul. All right?
I love how we
to your souls.
I love how we had that discussion because it makes me realize that when you're performing as the Punisher or you're narrating for Transformers, it makes me realize you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you love it. And that makes me respect and love your performance even more.
I got the Punisher. Okay, again, the Punisher came out as a 4-issue miniseries in Marvel back in 1988, I believe it was. And I missed getting the first 4 issues. They sold out so quickly. So when Punisher issue number 1 of the ongoing series came on, I bought it. And I bought the first 2 years of that. I know me some Frank Castle. So when they stepped up and said, yeah, let's do some Frank Castle. It was interesting because at first the developers were like, shouldn't he be more animated? Shouldn't he have more highs and lows and more emotion? And they're like, you do realize the first person that we're recording is the Punisher, right? You know? And it was a really interesting correction from the director to some of the producers, which was really funny because once they got into some of the other characters, like, oh yeah, those are the highs and lows. But this guy, because I had the honor for Marvel Rivals to be the first character actually recorded for the game, and so they were like, I don't know if this is working because we don't get the big emotion from this guy, and you're like, that's because it's Frank Castle.
Yeah, like if you're expecting emotion from Frank Castle, you're already setting yourself up for disappointment. But like,
Yeah, Frank Castle is.
I think it's time. I think it's time, Hoarder, we dive into some Punisher questions here. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
Give me some Punisher.
I've already answered that. We've already discussed that in depth. So, there's been a lot of live action portrayals of the Punisher. For example, I was first introduced to the Punisher because of Dolph Lundgren in the 1989 film. I was young when I watched that.
4 cinematics right now. We've got 4 cinematics of the Punisher.
Yeah, so I want to ask, who of the 4 are your favorite? You got Dolph Lundgren, Thomas Jane, and Ray Stevenson, rest in peace, and now John Bernthal. I feel they all bring like a unique style to the character, so it's very hard for me to say which is my favorite. But I would say probably John Bernthal shows the more sadistic, unpredictable side. But he's also had more time to develop that, whereas the other 3 are in movies. So they're kind of like limited.
Yeah. So that was one thing I was going to point out is that he's got a bigger arc. But I think the most important thing about all of these cinematic versions of the Punisher is how they deal with how smart the Punisher is, number 1. And number 2, how the loss of his family affects him. And those 2 things inform each one of these characters differently. John Bernthal is playing it that he didn't have value until his family, and when his family was taken away, it's time to go on the rage. Dolph Lundgren that was mine, you took it from me, I'm going to go after you. And it was singular. It's not the entirety of criminality. It was just, we need to make this focused. When you get into Ray Stevenson, you're looking at, I am just vengeance personified, and I'm here to just wipe out entire, I'm a single story to here wipe out this entire criminal organization. And it barely sort of flashes into that aspect of his past. So it's like each one of these actors have brought their own personalities and their own emotion to what would happen if you were dealing with that type of trauma. I like them all for specifically that reason, because it's almost like different flavors of ice cream. It's like I like chocolate. I like vanilla. I like Tutti Frutti. I like this one. And they all bring something different. Are they all ice cream? Yes, but are they bringing something different? Do I go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's good. Oh, I like that. I'm because it's the latest, I would say that the one that I enjoy and I want to see more of is John Bernthal. I want to see what he does on a big screen. We've brought Daredevil to a big screen. It's time for us to bring John back. I think that's going to be interesting. Because now that we've gotten through the giant arc of him dealing with bringing to justice the people who took his family away, I want to see what he has afterwards. I want to see what kind of character development now that we've gotten through the arc of becoming, because that's the major problem with most superhero stories, is that the origin story, yeah, dig in, it's awesome, but who are they afterwards? Do they have something interesting to bring? Is there an interesting arc afterwards? It's the reason why watching someone become is more important than watching someone be. It's the reason the first Matrix is way more relatable than the second and the third. It's the reason why Man of Steel, we want to spend more time with Superman when he's on the farm, rather than watching him punch the shit out of, whichever villain they're going to throw at him. We want to watch these origin stories because it makes them relatable. But that's what I'm curious about, is I want to see who John is now that we've gotten through that arc.
I love that. Same with so for me, I love Thomas Jane's 2004 performance. The difference I find with his is they didn't just kill his wife and his son. They killed his entire family over a 10-minute scene. And I was like, they went extreme with this. Like, they killed his father,
Well, they
his
wanted to make sure
mother.
that the trauma was real so that
Right.
his cold response is justified. You show more violence in the front, it justifies his violence at the end. Because if they didn't show it and they didn't show it off screen and you showed his brutality by the end, people would go, this is not a good man.
Mm-hmm.
You had to justify it. So in order to justify it, whoo, did they go far?
And one of my favorite things to talk about from that specific movie is how Thomas Jane has went on record saying that when he stabbed Kevin Nash, the Russian, with the knife, it was actually a real knife. And apparently the prop director forgot to replace it. So he's like, yeah, I legit stabbed Kevin Nash with the knife in that scene. And I was like, damn, that's ruthless. And he's like, Kevin Nash just sold it. Like, yeah, whatever. Let's just, let's keep it. And I was like, oh my God. But yeah, like you said, they all bring a different flavor for the character. I love the Punisher because I find that if any of us was in that situation, we potentially could go down the same path. Obviously, not as destructive because I'm not a former special agent, right?
Yeah, I know. We've all had our vengeance thoughts. Somebody has wronged us in some way, shape, or form, and instantly, in the heat of our stuff, our mind plays movies of all the crap that we would like to do to that person and how we would like to do it. Maybe we're even yelling at ourselves in the shower. I have no idea, but not that I've ever done that. But yeah, no, and so that's what makes the Punisher so interesting is because if we were allowed to, if the gloves were off, because there's plenty of superheroes out there that they're doing things because they're righteous. There's only two superheroes that I know of that do things strictly out of vengeance, and that's Ghost Rider and Punisher.
Yeah.
And so everybody else is like, we need to stop the evil. No, we need to punish the evil. We need to go after the evil. We need to make sure that it's eradicated and there's nothing but ashes left. We're not going to take these guys to jail. We're going to put these guys in the ground. I want to make sure that there's pieces of them everywhere. We have all felt that rage, and that's why it's so identifiable, is because, yeah, I would love to do that.
The Punisher is, oh my God, I love his character so much. Now, with that being said, I'm going to ask one more question, and Hoarder, I know you have some, but you have a lot of incredible lines in Marvel Rivals. One of which is my favorite is, I can't remember it word for word, but I'm paraphrasing here, is I will see my family someday, just not today. And when I heard that line, I was like, okay, some kids who may not be familiar with Punisher may not understand the emotional reference behind this line. But when I heard you say that line, I had goosebumps because it made me feel as if I was immersed into that character. Because I'm like, you just said this before I'm going to have a war. So now I definitely had to perform. So what are some of your favorite lines that you have said in that performance?
Know what? I wish I could say a bunch of them off the
Understood.
top of my head.
Understood.
I love my ultimate, everybody loves to scream at the top of their lungs. But the truth is that I go through these and I do these 1 to 2 times, and then I don't see them again until I'm in the game.
100%.
And I haven't had a chance to play a lot of the game. And some of these were recorded 2.5 years ago.
Damn.
So, yeah. In fact, I actually recorded The Punisher for 2 separate games. There was another Marvel game that came out before this, maybe about a year ago, and they decided not to put the Punisher in that game. But I have recorded all my lines for that game as well. So I was the Punisher in 2 different Marvel games. So there's a lot of them that I don't remember. The one that when you say them to me, I remember them. And I remember that line specifically, the one that you love so much, because most of this is match-based.
100%.
So when you have a chance to bring some of the lore to a match-based game, you make it honest. And since I have read The Punisher for so long, I knew what the weight of that was. It wasn't something to be schmaltzy. It was something meant to be, I'm talking to you, but this is an internal moment. And that, to me, was important to bring to that moment, because everything else is, punish! It's like, you want to get out there and just, like, and unless you're in, the lobby where you're talking to all the different characters when you realize that Rocket Raccoon is your spirit animal, you know, uh, you don't have a lot to play with. So when you do get those juicy moments, you just make them as honest as possible.
And you did that. There's also another one where you're talking to Bruce Banner, and Bruce is like, "Hey, can you like basically lower your level of punishment because it makes me stressed and anxious?" And then Punisher's like, "I'm ready for the Hulk." And then Bruce is like, "That's why I'm stressed." And I'm like, this Punisher is incredible, and it's like the like I said, that line where I will see my family someday, just not today. I was not expecting that in this format of a game. So when you deliver that line, I'm like, I love this character. I love this game because it makes you feel not only you're playing this character, but the respect of the lore, and they're bringing that lore into the game. So it was just
My interpretation of Frank Castle comes down to this. Everybody likes to point out that Daredevil is the man with no fear. But the Punisher, to me, specifically my version of it, is this man has nothing left to lose. So there is nothing to fear, because if he does come to his demise, that's just going to put him in the arms of his family.
mm-hmm.
So everything up until then is gravy. Everything up until then is taking out some of the trash. So taking that and making sure that it is always throughout, that's why he's ready for the Hulk. Why is he ready for the Hulk? Everybody else is terrified of the Hulk. Why? Because the more angry you make him, the more he can lift a damn mountain like he did in Secret Wars, okay? Literally lifted a mountain that was dropped on him. Does the Punisher care? No. No, he does not. You gonna take me out? Great. I see my family. Until then, taking out the trash.
I love his character so much. Hoarder, what was your question?
So, I was wondering, psychologically, how do you get into the mindset of someone like the Punisher? Like, do you go more method, or how do you take yourself to that very dark place of like, someone murdered my family? Like how do you do that?
For me, because I have such an expansive knowledge of his history, I can feel all that at once, because I have to layer all of that, because it's already in my brain. It's just an instant switch. But for me, it's two things. It's, if I'm standing here and I'm talking to you like this, great. But the Punisher, it's puffing up, it's getting into the physicality of it, so that you're right here. And so that way you feel it. And then everything else outside of that, all of the things that you're trying to relate to, has to come through this. I'm impatient because it is a match game. So even if he's in a lobby, every interaction is, yeah, this is nice, but get me out there.
That's so true.
Okay. And then the other thing is taking those moments from the impatience and make him be surprised. Like when he's speaking to the young girl who's in the mech Spider-Man suit. Penny, when he's speaking with Penny, he's surprised. And now you also have, she's young enough to be my daughter. You take these things and you take them moment by moment, and you take them by line, and you look at the line that you're talking to him and you go, yeah, I'm not just going to orate this line at person. I'm not going to spit it at him. I'm talking to somebody who could have been my daughter, and she lost her father who made this mech suit. We now have something to relate to, and she's young enough to be my daughter, so I'm going to be a touch uncomfortable with the fact that, oh my God, there's emotion peeking out in the Punisher. This is not something that I do. So if you notice, when he's talking to her, his last line gets a little grumbly. It's these things that inform us based on what is our backstory, where are we at. Each moment, each line is going to have its own intention. And so finding that intention is almost instinctful because you have that in the back of your brain. But when it comes to adopting the physicality of it and getting into it and making sure you're there, if you notice, I drop my chin, I bring my shoulders forward. And from now on, it's just going to be Frank Castle all frickin' day long.
two other real quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your favorite writer for Punisher? Mine would be Garth Ennis.
You know what? I don't have a lot of knowledge of who was writing back in the 80s. I wish I did. I was going through the major, God, why am I blanking on his name? The big X-Men writer, Chris. That arc from 171 all the way through to, this is Uncanny X-Men 171, all the way through to about 200. And that's when we got all of the great character building that took us away from, hey, here's a superhero, here's a villain, we're going to use this power against this villain, yay! No, let's give these guys backstories. My first issue was the one where Logan got turned away from Lady Mirko at their wedding.
Okay.
And Storm shows up having spent time with the Morlocks in her brand new I'm wearing leather with a frickin' mohawk look. And the following issue, 173, has Wolverine on the front with Rogue behind him. And it's where Rogue starts coming into the X-Men. And that is also the issue that the entirety of the Wolverine movie was based on, because that's where he comes up against the Silver Samurai.
Yeah.
So all of these things, the Punisher was right at that time, and I don't remember right off the top of my head who was writing the first 12 issues of the original series. Not the 4-issue miniseries, the original series. I would have to go back and look, and then I would have, because that's where everything is informed off of, is that first year, that first 12 issues. So I apologize for not knowing the name.
Oh, no, not at all.
My nerd cred has just dropped. So.
Not at all. And then like Garth Ennis, so Marvel was like crazy, and it was like, I want to say mid-90s or so, maybe later, they had the Max series for Marvel Comics. So that was like the
See,
adult
unfortunately, there was this thing called college, and I was starving. So I stopped
understand.
collecting comic books, because when I started collecting comic books, because I had done some when I was a kid, and I still have some of my, like, Boris Karloff Presents that I had gotten when they were only 35 cents an issue, and it's like 1977. But when I really started collecting comics was 1984. And from 84 forward, I was able to collect from 84 to 91.
Okay.
And during that time, they went from 75 cents an issue to $1.25 issue to the birth of Image Comics, where they jumped to $3.25 an issue. And when you're collecting multiple titles per month, that gets real expensive real fast when you're trying to put food on the table in college. Yeah. So I stopped reading comics for an enormous amount of time. And then when I started making money again, I realized, God, there's all of these great series that I never got a chance to read. Are these in graphic novel form? Mm-hmm. So what was the first thing that I went back and got? I haven't read The Sandman entire series. I haven't read Akira entire graphic novels. I haven't read Invincible, all of the omnibuses. It's like, these are the things that I get to go back, and while other people have been growing with these things, I get to go back and re-experience just the best of the best. I had not read any of the Swamp Thing that was done by the glorious master that did The Watchmen and V for Vendetta, and I never got a chance to read any of those. And now I'm reading them, and I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah,
but I also know that there was a time in the 2000s that a lot of writers, because they were just searching for things to write about, jumped the shark with a bunch of characters that I'm like, I'm glad I'd missed trying to collect and read that stuff. So I'm not going to get into some specifics, but yeah, there was some wince moments in there,
I hardly recommend checking out the Garth Ennis run of Punisher, though. So, like, the
Garth Ennis. I know of Garth Ennis. I know him as a writer from because a friend of mine gave me, like, I think he did a string of Thor as well.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and my friend gave me those Thors to read, and he was like, because I'm like, I've never been the biggest Thor fan. And the reason I've never been the biggest Thor fan is, like, what do you do when you're a god? How do you relate to him as a human being? I mean, every time that we saw him in any Avengers, he was there spinning Mjolnir, showing up on things, beating the crap out of it, bringing lightning down. But we didn't know anything about this guy. Okay, so when he shows me the God Killer, did he do the God Killer? Did Garth Ennis do the God Killer stuff that was turned into the latest one? I don't know if he was the writer behind that. But when you start getting into those in-depth things where suddenly you have a fragile human being, you have somebody who has flaws, you have somebody that I'm like, oh, Thor's interesting for the first time in forever. So yeah, there were certain people that, like, I never got into Scarlet Witch and Vision for a while, because how do you relate to a computer? It's like back in the day, Vision was this automaton that could do amazing things, and the only thing that humanized him was how Scarlet Witch felt about him. That was our reflection. So I wanted to, getting deeper into that now, it makes more sense for me to go back and read those things. I will now write that down. Garth Ennis going back and reading Punisher.
Yeah, so the Thomas Jane movie, basically when he fights the Russian, he's living in the apartment, all of that is taken from that run. So that's a lot of that from there. There are a lot of changes made, but still. But you just mentioned Vision. Check out Tom King. Tom King did an amazing 12-issue series. It's in a trade, Vision. And it's all about Wanda and Vision. And WandaVision is actually partially based on it.
Is this the one, because I believe I read that graphic novel where they have created an entire automaton family and they all sort of...
Yes.
I read that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good series.
Yes.
Yeah, that one was highly recommended to me, and so I went, okay, let me see more about Vision. These things that I've had, I am not above changing my mind about people or characters, so... I am not rigid in my stance on anything. You guys have good stories for me. Story will always be king. You show me that good story, I'll do it. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in Marvel is that it's the ending of the universe, and what do you have? You have Wolverine with the frickin' Phoenix inside him. Okay, that imagery of him is burned into my brain. It will come to me in visions in my dreams, okay? You have good story, frickin' throw it at me. I will change my mind about characters, but yeah. Like I always thought Crypto was a goofy character for kids, and now I just watched the new trailer the other day, and now I'm like, goodest boy ever.
That was such a great scene.
Because seriously, I mean, when you think about Crypto with his little cape, you're like, okay, that was made for kids. And now we've got Soul. We've got totally changed my mind with one series of images over a period of 1.5 minutes. Come on.
Yes. Yeah. James Gunn, he's awesome. And then
I'm seriously excited about James Gunn because James Gunn feels about the DC universe about how much I feel about the Marvel universe. He loves them. So if you have that much love and have that much understanding of the world to be able to turn DC in the right direction, looking forward to it, man.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah.
My final question is, real quick, was there...
No, you got time. You got time, guys. You're not rushing me.
Was there any blooper at all for the Punisher?
Oh, jeez.
He knows what's coming. Where you accidentally said, Judge, Judy, and Executioner.
No. I never said that, but there's been plenty of times where I'll flub and I'll be like, Judge, jury, except fuck. So that has happened more often than not.
The first time I heard it, I was like, oh my God. Imagine if it was Judge Judy and Executioner.
Yeah. Judge, jury. Oh, God damn it. Because sometimes one of the things that you don't know about voice actors is when we get into our call outs, I have figured out over years how to make it sound like I'm screaming while not screaming. But when you start getting into battle efforts like, when you get into that, if you get too into it, sometimes you get the hiccups. So you're there and you're trying to swallow, and I'm sure many voice actors out there are literally sagely nodding their heads. They're like, yeah, and then you're sitting there and you're like, Judge! Oh, God damn it. So it's really funny. Those are the types of bloopers that you would find from the Punisher.
Yeah, when Hoarder brought that up to me, I was like, oh, Hoarder.
Listen, humanity, man, humanity.
I mean, it's a fair question because they're very close. Judge, jury, Judge, Judy. I get it. It's literally like basically one letter.
Order. This is for you, dude. Judge, Judy, executioner. That's for you. That's. I probably blew out my mic. I had
to hold my laughing until we were completely done. I was like, oh my God.
I would have laughed at that causing hiccups.
Awesome.
Well, Bill,
that's going to be somebody's freaking ringtone, or it's going to be like, it's going to be my new message indicator.
Right.
Yeah.
Her next season, if she has one, that'll be the opening now. I do have to say, I don't know if you can mention it. I'm taking a risk here, but you did mention that you did Punisher for another Marvel game that was not where he was not released. Can you talk about what that was?
No.
Okay.
Really
I figured as much, but I wanted to ask.
Here's the reason why is because I recorded all these lines, and that was almost 3 years ago. And I know that there was going to be in one thing, and it literally said in the breakdown that this is for another game that is not this game, and they hired me for it, and I came in and I did my lines. I have no idea how it would have worked. I knew that this one game was released, and it said that I was a part of it, and then I checked, and that character's not even there at all, and I'm like, okay, so maybe I am not a part of this, and that's okay. These are things that producers do all the time. There are times... My favorite story about a character that was meant, that was written, that was put into and filmed and done, and it ended up on the floor is... There's a film, and I need to look this up really quickly. There was a film that was about a reunion where a bunch of people come to the reunion to hash it out, their emotional relationships to each other because of this funeral. And what is it called? Hold on one second here. I gotta make sure I know what this one is.
You got me thinking now.
I know this is taking up time, guys. So just imagine that there's a Jeopardy theme going on here. Okay, so let me go through here. I believe he was in this, and I'm gonna check this because this is an incredible story about like making sure that the story is the most important thing and not making, one person the most important part of that. Hold on, special thanks, self. Go to the acting, please. Archival full footage. Director, producer, actor. Okay. Come on. Where was this?
Judge Judy. Jeez.
I know, Judge Judy. Yeah, I can't seem to find it right now. But basically what happened was this. In this film, and I can't remember it, and somebody's going to put it in the comments, and they're going to go, Bill, you're going to remember it from this. Just because my fishbowl brain, goldfish brain just isn't pulling it up right now, is that... like Jennifer Tilly was in it, and it was all of these, young college people coming back because this person had passed away. And in the original script of the film, they actually showed the person who passed away and how people were relating to him and stuff like that. And that was going to be Kevin Costner's breakthrough performance. It was going to be him in the film. And they cut him entirely out. The only thing you see in the film of him is his hand when they're dressing him in the very beginning for this thing. You don't even see his face.
Jeez.
So... literally, and this was before he got into some of the other roles that he ended up having. Let me see if it's actually listed on Kevin's thing. But, sometimes producers realize that it doesn't work for whatever the story is. Kevin Costner.
It happens a lot more than we would think, to be honest.
It happens a lot more than you expect, I mean, all of these things that you would expect, and it just doesn't happen. Here, hold on.
I'm just trying to think of some examples I know that has happened, in regards to.
It was The Big Chill.
The Big Chill.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so here's The Big Chill. A group of 7 former college friends gather for a weekend reunion at a South Carolina vacation home after the funeral of another of their college friends. Kevin Costner plays the guy who died and is not in the damn film.
Jeez.
That happens. And it's okay that it happens. It sucks for us as actors. But at the same time, what works best for the story? The story is the most important thing. We can't be precious when it comes to, hey, I need to have this amount of screen time. And we have to be precious about what serves the story. That's just my personal opinion. So
I can definitely agree with
sometimes
that.
it works, sometimes it doesn't, because there's plenty of times where we have imagery or extra scenes that don't make sense. And then there's extra scenes that producers think that don't need to be there that make sense entirely. My favorite add a scene that producers said, don't put that in, Guardians of the Galaxy 1. The scene where they're all talking about whether or not they're going to be family and they end up standing with each other, and you got Rocket going, now we're all standing around like a bunch of assholes. That kind of moment, that scene. Producers said, we don't need that scene. They didn't want to shoot it. And James Gunn said, no, that scene needs to be in here. Why? Because this character development showed that that's where they become a family. That's where they made the choice to,
I love those movies so much.
Important things. Anyway, as you can tell, I get a little passionate about stories.
Twin Peaks Season 3, there's a scene where a guy is just going and he's cleaning the floor. For like 2 minutes, he's cleaning the floor in Season 3 of Twin Peaks. The reason they do that, though, is they pull the camera away to the phone that's ringing, and you find out that the person that picks up the phone is doing a drug deal. Mm-hmm. So David Lynch is very interesting in that way, where he'll have scenes that are uncomfortably long, and you don't understand exactly why until something happens, and it just kind of.
And the point is to put you on edge so that when the moment happens, it shocks you.
Yes.
One last story. It's one of my favorite uneasy moments. Eyes Wide Shut. Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick likes to do these incredibly long shots to keep you uncomfortable. And my favorite moment of that is Tom Cruise is being stalked. He's walking down the street, and he's noticing there's a man in a trench coat who's walking behind him and staring at him. So he walks down the street, turns the corner, walks up to a newsstand and picks up a newspaper, but doesn't even look at the newspaper, just looks at the man. And because he had turned the corner, you have one side of the street and the other side of the street. And the man walks into view looking directly at Tom Cruise, does not turn his eyes away, continues walking across the street, and then is gone. And you are now more unnerved that you don't know where he is than if you were when he was following Tom Cruise. Awesome. Just awesome storytelling.
I've actually never seen that movie. So that's made me, I'm like, wow.
If you don't go back and watch all of Kubrick's films, you'll be like me, because there's a couple that I still haven't seen.
Clockwork Orange is my favorite.
Yeah,
actually.
But, go back and watch some of the good ones. I still need to see 4 of his films, actually. In fact, maybe I'll do that tonight. Yeah.
What do you have to see? Barry Lyndon?
I haven't seen Barry Lyndon. I haven't seen Lolita.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
Lolita, I actually have a story about that. So Dominique Swain plays the young character. Mm-hmm. I actually had her cast in my short film, Photographic Memory, which she won her first award with, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Dominique Swain is an incredible actress. Like, I could definitely see her doing a Captain Marvel if Brie Larson wasn't available. But yeah, Lolita, I've never seen the movie, though. Once again, like, I'm in the doghouse with Hoarder, because there's a lot of movies I haven't seen. Hoarder's like, what?
Here's the beauty of it. Here's the beauty of things. There is a lot of content out there now, and not a lot of good storytelling, which means that once you reach the point where, I've watched all the things that were actually decent this year, instead of scrolling through Netflix, searching for the next hour for something that has something above 3 stars, you can go back and watch Barry Lyndon. You can go back and watch Lolita. You can go back and watch, for me, and this is just a little thing to throw out there, find an actor you like or a director you like and go back and watch all their stuff.
That's true.
Go back and rewatch everything. Sometimes you'll see things that you haven't seen before, I haven't seen Christopher Nolan's first film, which was only like 70 minutes long. It's Following. I got to go see Following. There's a lot of things that I got to go. There's so much that you can learn and so much good storytelling, because when people in the 70s and 80s wanted to put millions of dollars behind something, they made sure their scripts were tight. They weren't just trying to fill up time. They were trying to bring people to the theaters. So, you know, yeah, I miss good screenwriting sometimes.
Lots of good discussion. Lots of good discussion. I have to ask a question though before we finish up here. Is where can people connect with you? Where can they find your work or
Instagram.
Instagram?
Instagram.
Okay.
Or if you just want to follow on what's going on in my life professionally, I do promote and post all the things that I'm doing on X. I'm sort of drifting more towards Threads these days, just because I feel like X is giving way too much political
Yeah,
angst.
I don't
I
blame
find
you.
that my algorithm is trying to show me people punching the crap out of each other
Yep.
or getting into bad stuff, and I'm like, I don't want this algorithm. I don't want to have to. That's not stuff that I want my eyeballs to see. So Threads and Instagram and Instagram. It's under my name, Bill Millsap, but the actual name of this of my page is Audio U the number 4 IA Audio Euphoria, which is a callback to the AOL Instant Messenger days.
Oh my
when you had
God.
this many letters, and you had to create a name, and Audio Euphoria was it.
I was wondering because like I was taking you in some of the posts and I'm like, I need to know the name here. I don't get this. Okay,
Yeah,
now
so
it makes
that
sense.
was AOL Instant Messenger.
Okay.
AOL Instant
We
Messenger.
are
It
that
needed to
old,
be
ladies and
this
gentlemen.
many. Yeah. It needed to be this many letters. It couldn't be less than. It needed to be this many letters. So what can you do? So I came up with that, and it's stayed with me ever since.
Is there any upcoming projects you can talk about? If not, I completely understand.
No,
Okay.
not right now. But if people want to see interesting things, we've talked a lot about story, and I'm gonna lay this out. I grew up on anime dub. Like, I started with Star Blazers, and then I got into Robotech and G-Force. And so dub was a very important part of my life. And so when I was offered the opportunity to start directing dub, it was incredibly important for me to make sure that the dubs that I direct are as emotionally resonant as the original Japanese, and the Japanese are not so concerned about their performances matching animation. You'll notice there's extra flaps sometimes, there's those types of things. For me, I didn't want to break the verisimilitude of the animation to the performance. So I would rewrite on the fly with the authorization of the producers to make sure that it matched flaps, so that all of these things that we were watching, if you watch them in English dub, I want you to be so immersed in it to make you feel like, oh, this was drawn for English. I didn't
Okay.
want you to feel like that. So if you guys want to go and see any of my directing stuff, Makoto Shinkai's Suzume, which was nominated last year for Best Animated Feature at the Golden Globes, I did the English dub of that. That is on Netflix. If you want to see something that I'm extremely proud of, there is a four-episode series called Housing Complex C on HBO. What ended up happening was they were developing it while we were recording it. They had recorded the Japanese, and when they started getting some of the imagery there, I was really digging into the emotion of the imagery. And for English audiences, they decided that the original language should be English because they liked the English performances so much. So if you go to HBO, it will say English original performances, and that's something that I directed. I also directed the following shows: Engage Kiss, Kakaguri Twin, that's on Netflix. Engage Kiss is on Crunchyroll. Tokyo 24th Ward, and one of my favorites, just because it's completely different than any anime out there. If you guys are fans of Coen Brothers mysteries,
Yes.
watch Odd Taxi.
Okay.
Odd Taxi is anthropomorphic animals in Tokyo taking place all around one taxi driver. There are 5 interconnecting stories that all have to deal with a kidnapping, a murder, a manzai comedy troupe, a idol band, all of these things all interspersed around this one character, and it is brilliant. It is really, really fun. You need to get through the first 4 episodes of setup, and then it just takes off like a gunshot.
That sounds
Love
amazing.
it.
It reminds me of Paranoia Agent, actually, by Satoshi Kon.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way: if you liked Miller's Crossing,
Yes.
same structure. Remember, it's him with all these different like things going around him.
Sure.
Same flavor. And everything makes sense by the end, and then you're like, damn.
That's the direction we want. Like I love great storytelling. But Bill, Punisher, it has been such a great time talking to you. I really appreciate taking the time.
Thank you, guys.
I would love to.
And speaking of Suzume, this is one of the characters in Suzume.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So, if you like cute and maniacal.
Good job.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill. I would love to.
Thank you guys so much for the time, and thank you guys for digging into all sorts of things instead of just what has this actor done. We dug into some really hard topics today, and I'm really, really proud of you guys. This is really, really good stuff, and I'm proud of both of you. I'm going to be listening to your industrial music, and I want to see your short film that you freaking won awards.
It's on YouTube. I'll send you a link.
Send me links, and I want to listen to
My Iron Spine.
My Iron Spine. I was going to say there was a medal in there, and I wanted to remember what that was. Is it on Spotify?
So it's actually on Bandcamp. I can send you a link.
Send links. Put links for people watching. Make sure that both of those links are in the comments when you decide to post this, so people can go and support our lovely two dudes here. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. And we would love to have you back on within like 9 months to a year, just to see how you're doing and what's up with you and what's new. Thank you so much, Bill.
I am directing a lot of things right now that I can't talk about, and
so much to come.
9 months to a year, there's going to be lots to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. Thanks, you, Hoarder.
All right. Bye, guys.